Afternoon, and thank you for being here today. My name is Josh Houry. I am the communications coordinator here for the Saskatchewan SPCA. Thank you for joining us for today. It is our second webinar in the Exploring Animal Welfare Legislation in Saskatchewan series. For those of you who maybe don't know, promoting the humane treatment of animals has always been one of the Saskatchewan SPCA's guiding principles. Legal regulations are an important feature of ensuring the humane use and treatment of animals, from working animals to wildlife to livestock and companion animals. The humane treatment is very important. The province of Saskatchewan maintains several different laws to protect the animals that live here in our province, and these pieces of legislation are applied daily by those directly and indirectly involved in animal welfare. Today's presentation will focus on the legal rights of service animals, emotional support animals, and pets. Colleen Anne Dell's presentation will offer a basic introduction to the legal and practical distinctions between service animals, emotional support animals, and companion animals, while Valerie Karen will provide an overview of the use of service dogs, their roles, and animal-assisted interventions in healthcare settings. Today's webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel for viewing at a later date. And we do encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And we will have time at the end of each presentation to answer any questions that do come in. I will now introduce our first speaker today. Colleen Anne Dell is a professor and Centennial Enhancement Chair in One Health and Wellness at the University of Saskatchewan in the Department of Sociology and the School of Public Health in Canada. She is also a Senior Research Associate with the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction. Grounded in a community-based approach, her research focuses on healing from addictions and mental health, with specific attention to animal-assisted interventions, ranging from canine-assisted therapy to service dog interventions. She has two therapy dogs, EJ and Molly, who alongside community and academic partners are involved in various projects with Colleen and her team, examining how animals benefit human wellness. These projects include federal prisoners, university students, seniors, addictions treatment clients, war veterans, and youth. Animal wellness is considered in all of Colleen's work. Colleen has worked extensively at the community and national levels, including the Elizabeth Fry Society, Correctional Service Canada, and the Senate of Canada. Underlying Colleen's work is a belief in bringing together different ways of knowing. Her commitment to facilitating understanding is recognized and producing a variety of unique knowledge mobilization products from her funded studies, including music videos and paintings. In 2022, Colleen was promoted in the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, a part of Canadian honor system, to the rank of officer for her humanitarian research and community service in the animal-assisted intervention field. Colleen, thank you for being here today. I will turn it over to you.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry that was so long.
That's okay.
Hi, everybody. I want to acknowledge the land, Treaty 6 territory, and homeland of Métis, where I am today. Yourselves for being here, and any animals. I have EJ over there. He decided to leave out of the picture, which is fine. He hears something happening outside the door there. EJ is tested and passed as a service dog with a specific service dog organization here in Saskatchewan called Audiamus for research purposes. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about that today. And there are no provincial standards, which I'm definitely going to talk about today. We have no national standards for service dogs as well. And some provinces do, like Alberta, BC, and Nova Scotia. EJ is also a therapy dog, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that distinction. But I was supposed to put up my presentation there. Okay. So hopefully we'll all see it. So I am going to talk a little bit about therapy dogs as well. And I have a therapy dog there on the screen. If I'm looking this way, it's because it's my other screen. That's Annabelle. She has passed now, but I want to share that because she's with Ruben. And it's about the human-animal bond. So I'm going to share a tiny bit about that too, because I don't think we can talk about these amazing animals in our lives and in society without recognizing the human-animal bond and that reciprocal relationship, which really talks about animal welfare when we talk about this mutual relationship that we have with these dogs and these working dogs. And like Josh said, I'm going to share some basic information today, some legal and practical distinctions, some definitions, a little bit about the training requirements, and then also I'm going to give the example of housing and rental housing in particular, and then pass it off to Valerie, who I know has a great presentation, is going to bring some of this stuff to life. And there you go. So I just wanted to share that I work with a large team. All our work is community-based. Here are the few of the dogs that I work with. You can see EJ, he's there. Well, no, that's EJ there. And here's Molly, that I work most closely with these days. I'm from the Positive Connections Lab at the University of Saskatchewan. We just released this lab last week to bring all the work of myself and all our students and Dr. Lindsay Williamson in psychology and health studies, and Dr. Darlene Chalmers and in social work at the University of Regina. And what we look at overall in our work is the interactions between animals and people, with this focus on connection and the importance of connection in mental health and addiction. My own research, as Josh said, is in many, many different areas and lots of practice as well. Our therapy dogs are in the emergency department in Saskatchewan, prisons, addiction treatment centers, and I'll talk about EJ's work as a service dog as well. So I have two slides here that I think are the most important, and it's really just the distinction between all the categories. And oftentimes, if I'm teaching this or we're doing a program in the jail or whatever, even though we'll talk about it, and then people still get it confused, and which is okay, because a lot of people use these terms just variously and they interchange them. But here are some basics. And this number one is a therapy dog. And what therapy dogs do is they provide comfort and support to individuals who do not have access to a dog typically. So a therapy dog would be the animal that you see in the emergency department, or that are visiting, those dogs are visiting on the university campus. They are not allowed in public spaces except where they are invited into, like those two. And I'll give more examples after. Service dogs are specifically trained to assist a person with a disability. So typically, Valerie's going to talk a lot about this. You're looking at a 2-year training process for the dog. And this is for individuals who have a visible or an invisible disability. So I just like this slide here, because this is talking about service dogs in particular, is Assistance Dogs International. They talk about the type of assistance or service dogs, or service animals, I should say. And they talk about, well, I should say for the most part, these are animals that you see, these are the animals you would see, for example, in a restaurant, right? And almost exclusively they are dogs. There are some miniature horses that do this role. I have not seen those in Canada myself, but that absolutely is a thing. A very smart animal as well. And these are not pets. They may work as, or they may serve as a pet in their off hours in some ways, but these are working dogs. So you have the guide dog for people who are seeing impaired. Then you have a hearing dog for the hearing impaired. And then you also have the service dogs. And again, this can range from physical disabilities, psychiatric disabilities or diagnoses. Autism would be another one. And again, these are some basic definitions here. Once in a while, you'll see the use of different terms. And I think Valerie will probably talk about facility dogs, right? So it gets kind of confusing out there. So I just kind of be aware of what you're talking about. So if you're talking about a service dog, I would follow that sentence with saying exactly what it is you're looking for information on, or you're sharing information on, or what have you, because people really are using the terms interchangeably. But again, if you look here, therapy dogs, the ones that are visiting, service dogs, well-trained, very well-trained dog for someone with a disability or living with challenges in their lives. And there are some examples. And then we come to emotional support animals. And emotional support animals, they provide support to a person with a mental disorder or a mental illness. And they are prescribed by a mental health professional. And the animal is seen as necessary for that individual's mental health and to maintain their mental health. They live with their owners. These are animals that are not trained in any way. There is just this really strong bond that they have with their owner. This is the animals you would have seen on planes. If you remember pre-COVID, we had everything from a duck to a peacock going on a plane as an emotional support animal. So most frequently now what we do see is dogs, right? Not the peacocks anymore. And then we have companion animals. It's just a term people are using more and more in place of pets. And there's reasons for that. So, but no matter the category of the animal, what's really important here is the human-animal bond between the animals. And remember, dogs are born to, or they're bred to bond, right? That's part of the evolution. And so this is a piece we had come out last week in the Globe and Mail about the human-animal bond. And we're increasingly seeing the importance of the human-animal bond. We see dogs in stores, Prairie Sky Brewery, lots of different examples. It's increasing more and more. So I'm just going to give a quick example of the human-animal bond in each of those four categories. Briefly, we did a study in the emergency department here in Saskatoon in the RUH. And again, we found there was this underlying human-animal bond with therapy dogs. We had dogs visiting people who were in the emergency department for pain, and we did a controlled trial. So 100 people visited with the dog, and 100 people didn't. Those who visited with the dog, they saw a clinically significant decrease. This is what we saw in their pain and other like anxiety, depression, and well-being. Positive things happening in those areas as well. Service dogs, again, I just want to underline that human-animal bond. We saw in a study with veterans who were training their service dogs, we saw a decrease in their PTSD symptoms. We also saw a decrease in their substance use, in particular opioids and alcohol. And we saw an increase in their medical cannabis use, which we could say is harm reduction from using opioids and alcohol to medical cannabis. And it was due to two things. And this is where our team really added to the literature. It's the technical skills, like Valerie's going to talk about with Loki, but it is also the human-animal bond that the veterans really identified. So companion animals, again, we did a study here on opioid use disorder in a methadone clinic in our city. And we found that pets fulfilled a supportive role for humans or for these patients in the program, which humans could not, or which humans chose not to. Again, that really unique connection bond. And the last one here, there is not a lot of research on emotional support animals, but there is a study came out, I think it was 2022 from the University of Toledo. And it was the first study, and they saw positive benefits for depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And again, linked back to the human-animal bond. So I think I underscored that enough, the importance of the human-animal bond. So let's turn to the policy now for these amazing animals that we get to live and work with. So the Saskatchewan policy on therapy dogs, it really is up to individual locations. So we take our therapy dogs, for example, the emergency department. It took a long time to get in there, to get all the policies, to make sure they had everything was in place for this to be safe and appropriate for everyone that was there, including the dogs. Then this is just an example from the University of Saskatchewan. This is our animals on campus policy. And you'll see that therapy animals as certified by St. John Ambulance right now are the dogs that are allowed on campus. And that started in 2013. I'm going to talk about service and emotional support animals a little bit later at U of S because they fall under a different policy. The Saskatchewan policy on service dogs, it's you look under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission, and I think it's 4 pages there. And key here is that we do have a duty to accommodate service animals. And in the policy, I just printed it out here. They talk about guide dogs. They identify hearing dogs, service dogs, which they identify as mobility or health impairments. They also have another category, and this is like I was saying before, there's lots of categories depending where you're looking. They talk about a social signal dog, and this would assist a person with autism, for example. If they were doing repetitive behaviors, the dog would learn to interrupt. They also have the category of a seizure response dog. And this is a dog who may stand over a person to guard them as they were having their seizure. They may be trained to go ask for help, or they could be trained to detect when a seizure was going to start through their sense of smell and provide a warning to that person so they can make themselves safe. And then they also identify psychiatric service animals. And this would alert a person to, if they were having an episode, reminding them to take their medication. And again, I think what's just important here is not all those categories, but the fact that they are all contained. I don't think there's one dog's job I can think of that would not fit under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission categories there. When we're talking about service dogs in public places, businesses are required to accommodate dogs, service dogs. And I think what's really important to know, so the one place service dogs would not be allowed is where food is prepared. They can go into a restaurant, but not the kitchen. And there really is no requirement for anybody in attendance with a service animal to show or to give any evidence that it is a service animal. And this is under our Human Rights Commission. When you would have to show that this is a service animal, you might have a training certificate or something like that, is if the dog was causing a disturbance. So that you may have to show us a training certificate at that point. And then as a handler, if the dog is causing a disturbance, you probably would want to leave that situation of whatever's going on and maybe have to do a little bit of training or just figure out what was upsetting for the dog in that situation. When we talk about housing, landlords and community associations, again, like condominiums, they do have a duty to accommodate. And once again, you do not have to show in any way that you may have to show that, yes, this is their service dog, but you do not have to identify what the service dog specifically is for. So I know, and probably Valerie has these experiences, and just I know with our veterans that we work closely with, if I'm at Walmart with EJ working with him, I could probably count 5 times someone will say, "Oh, that's so amazing. What do you need him for?" And for me, it's in a research capacity, so it's not really upsetting. But if I needed him, I surely do not want to tell you why, and I don't have to, right? So that question gets asked a lot, I think, through restaurants and things like that, but that does not have to be relayed. Again, education, occupation, employment places, they do have to accommodate, and there are specific policies on the U of S campus that I'm going to talk about in a second. The one thing, again, I wanted to point out were the obligations of the handler. And again, if your dog was causing a disruption in some instance, then it is your responsibility to make sure that they are properly controlled, or you leave that situation. There are exceptions to this duty to accommodate, again, whether it's housing or in the restaurant or what have you. And what that means is that not every dog has to be accommodated in every space. And just it says here, for example, if the attendance of a service animal presents an unreasonable risk to health or safety of others, then there is no duty to accommodate. Then it goes on to say, but minor irritation, limited financial costs, or unsupported fears of property damage do not represent an undue hardship, right? So it has to be something very, very significant. I shouldn't say very, very, but it has to be something significant to not accommodate. I talked a little bit at the beginning there about the lack of standards. Alberta and BC follow the Assistance Dogs International standards, but they do not have to be accepted by every province in any way. Nova Scotia has their own standards, and they're actually the St. John's Ambulance Therapy Dog Test, which is interesting. But again, it's just to make sure, I'm sure they're doing that so that this animal is safe out in public. The Standards Council of Canada does not have any standards. The Canadian Foundation for Animal Assisted Support Services has created some voluntary standards, and that happened last year, if people are interested in the standards. Veteran Affairs Canada has been trying to create standards for a very long time. Very difficult because everyone has a different, when you bring the different dog trainers together, they have a different view of what the dog should and shouldn't be able to do. And I always say it's like if we brought a bunch of parents around the same table and said, oh, we all have to agree on how to parent, it'd be incredibly difficult, right? So the same thing has happened with Veteran Affairs Canada. The House of Commons did have a standing committee. I think it was 2 years ago. We presented to it, Darlene and myself, and they really underscored the need for these national standards. But again, they don't exist at this time. I just want to say, yeah, so the U of S standards, they came up with their own, and it's quite a lengthy document. I think it's 12 pages. It is for students only. I'm actually not sure where faculty or staff fall into that. There is no standards that I can find. Well, they call them procedures. They shouldn't call them standards. They call them procedures if you want your service dog on campus with you as a student. And either you are accredited or you are tested by ADI, the Assistance Dogs International, or you have been tested by one of those 3 provinces I talked about, or you're with another organization, and then you'll need a medical note as well, and a veterinarian certificate and your training certificate. Or if you don't have any of that and you've trained your own dog, the university has an approved trainer tester who would then test your dog to say that, yes, that dog is safe on campus. And it would also have to be housebroken, have vaccinations, including rabies, because I know some people are not supportive of rabies, but they would have to be on the U of S campus. So I just wanted to point this out. Dr. Lindsay Williamson in the lab, she did this environmental scan with some of the students last year of service dog organizations in Canada, and there were just under 100. So that's a lot. 1/3 of them were for-profit, and 2/3 of them were not-for-profit. I also want to point out this, with WestJet, their policy was always changing. I have flown with the service dogs, 2 different ones at different times. The policy now for flying is they say you need proper documentation for the authorities. So it used to be the airline that I would show the information to. And I think all this stuff that had happened, they're like, no, we do not. There are no national standards. We don't want to take this over. So the authorities within the airport are now taking that over. And again, yeah. So every airline. So if you are going to fly, if you have a service dog, or you're thinking of flying in the future, I would look quite regularly because these policies change a lot. WestJet, in my view, when I look at the policies now, are much more open than the Air Canada policy, personally. But again, that can change. So here's some policy around companion pets in Saskatoon. Things like animals over 4 months, dogs and cats, need to be licensed. So that's some things we have going on in the city, and that's supposed to happen every 12 months. And if you are doing that, that's really good because it's helping to support their spay and neuter program, which is really great. We also have this dog parks. We have 11 dog parks, I think. I don't know if the small one is the 12th or not. For the small dogs, you do need a license to be in the parks with your companion animals. And then we also have those dog days of summer at Mayfair Pool. So again, not policies per se, but there are some procedures that are linked to having companion animals in Saskatoon. Okay, emotional support animals, again, falls under Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission, and the U of S also has a very specific policy for students. And going back to Saskatchewan human rights here, emotional support animals, like I said at the beginning there, for alleviating symptoms of certain mental disorders. The animals provide nurturance, they provide support, they provide comfort to their individuals. And typically they are at home. The animals are not really going out with the individual, and they don't require specialized training. Again, it's really about that bond that they have. Though remember that human rights law or these policies are created on when things are going before the court, right? And they talk about these being based on evidence. So people will present before the court this study happened on this, and all of a sudden it'll become part of this policy. So as that evidence grows, like I said, there is now that one study, or there was the first study. I'm sure a few more have come since there on emotional support animals. I could see this policy growing. And as people challenge it and say, well, I actually need the animal in so-and-so situations, this is going to grow. I think, and I'm just going to say that we're concerned for myself with this one. Again, these animals are not trained, and the animal welfare component becomes really of concern to me. I have seen all types of dogs out and about, from dogs who are apparently service dogs to emotional support animals who are not happy. And I've seen them really in the States more so than in Canada, like dogs going on flights who are absolutely shaking their tails under, right? And they're going on as emotional support animals. So that is of a concern to me. So with an emotional support animal, landlords and condominiums association, they do have a duty to accommodate. And where you have this medical evidence that establishes that this individual requires this animal to alleviate their symptoms of a mental disorder. And that a letter has to be provided from a medical professional, and it has to come from a medical professional that has been working with that individual. When we talk about the U of S policies, it gets a little bit very specific. So you would be able to rent in housing or what have you, if you had the legal definition, or you had under the Human Rights Commission, your animal is designated as an emotional support animal. So it may be a non-rental. We know that's a real problem in Saskatchewan, in particular Saskatoon, about not being able to rent if you have a pet. So that would not apply if you had that designation for the animal. Yeah, and then I had said this already, but it says the duty to accommodate emotional support animals in public services, employment, and education is a developing area of law. And again, my concern becomes the developing area of law is about human welfare, and the animal welfare I have not seen really accounted for in that when we're talking about emotional support animals. Oh. So again, I'm just going to give you a couple examples here from the U of S, because they've gone and created policy. This one's really in depth as well. This one's 10 pages of what a student would need to do to have their animal designated as an emotional support animal. And they've done a very good job, and they've been incredibly thorough. So having a look through that, you'll see a lot more specificity than you would in the Human Rights Commission here. And again, it's because the human rights, this is new, right? You think about service animals, you think about emotional support animals, this is new. So the U of S, as a student, for example, you have to register with Access Equity Services. You have to fill out their medical questionnaire. A licensed health practitioner has to provide a letter, and it has to be a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist or a physician. It cannot be someone online that that student had not been working with quite often, because we know people were buying vests off Amazon, and just so much was happening, right? So they've done, again, a really good job at U of S if you want to look at an example, and I'm sure they're in other provinces and things as well. And again, that medical professional has to show that that person is under treatment for a disability that falls under the DSM-5. And then there's veterinarian requirements. If it is a dog, they will have to go under the assessment by the university identified trainer. They would have to do an assessment. If it's not a canine, they need a letter from the veterinarian stating that the animal is healthy and doesn't pose a risk for transmitting diseases. And then there's a bunch of forms and things the individual have to identify. And again, I think, like the university, I'm just using one example, had to be very, very specific, because without policy, it was, people were doing a lot of broad things that maybe were not in the best interest of everyone involved. And this is what I just want to kind of end on here. We had this come out last year around this time with our Pause in Places program. And I can show it. It's the Saskatoon Pet Friendly Rental Housing Guide. Everything I talked about today is in really plain language in there, and lots of links and things. And then what I didn't talk about that's in there, what I really like, is that we have an example of a pet resume and also a reference form. So if you are looking for rental housing or condominiums or what have you, having these in place for the animal. And again, that could be a companion animal. Maybe they took the canine good neighbors test, which would be awesome, right? To show the landlord that yes, they were able to pass that. If you have a service dog, you would have all the training, so that I think it can alleviate some of the problems that come in the future. And again, those problems surface because there's just so much misunderstanding, right? People know what kind of animal that they're working with, but the general public and rental associations and stuff, for the most part, don't. So being very clear and having a reference form and a resume up front would be, I think, incredibly helpful. And then I know Laura had shared with me, I think it was Laura at the Saskatchewan SPCA, they had students this summer, and there's a nice page on their website talking about rental and different things for Saskatchewan, I think Manitoba as well. And then we're working with a law student right now that's reviewing the rental policies in each of our provinces and territories for all 4 categories of animals. And we will take that forward in the province, because again, I think if there was a report card, and I don't know this yet because she's not finished this work, but if there was a report card, I think we'd probably fall pretty low in Saskatchewan in allowing animals in housing. And if that's our view typically, then I think this is posing problems too for people with emotional support animals and service animals. And yeah, we're doing pretty good with the therapy dogs, I think, since we have them out and about in lots of places. And yeah, and I'm just going to leave it at that. If you're looking for more information, you can go on my website at colleendell.com. You can follow us on, what's that called? Facebook, on Annabelle and Subi's Adventures. EJ's on there, that he's sleeping right now. And then Positive Canine Connections on Instagram.
Thank you, Colleen. That was a great presentation. Lots of useful information there as well. We do have a question that has come in following your presentation. And the question is, are there any plans to approach rentalsmen about allowing renters, even those without needs, to have their pets stay with them? Oh, you're on mute.
You'd think by now. Yeah, 100%. That is what our goal is. We were funded by Mars, or Royal Canin, and 2 years ago, and that funding ran out, but our group still exists, and hopefully with the work with the law student and Sarah Bueller at the University of Saskatchewan in law will help us put this information out, because the research does show us that people are now renting more. People are delaying childbirth if they're having kids at all, and they're replacing them with fur babies or whatever, right? So animals are having such an important role, so that if you were renting, or if you were the renter, there's a huge population here you want to make sure that you're accessing, right? And there, of course, there's sometimes worries about damages, but that is not showing in the literature to be a reason for not renting. At least that's what our empirical evidence is showing us.
Yeah, and I have to say, as somebody who lives with several animals, like the amount of damage that has happened in my house is almost non-existent, aside from like normal wear and tear, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah. You had mentioned some pro bono students who had done some work with us last year with the Saskatchewan SPCA. And I do just want to mention that you can visit our website, saskspca.ca, look under resources, and you will see rights of tenants with pets in Saskatchewan. And there's some information there that might be useful for folks as well. And I know this is something that our legislative committee is looking to tackle more as well. So there are a number of groups that are looking into this matter, and hopefully we'll see some meaningful change in the not too distant future. We can get some time here for a few more questions. If you have any questions for Dr. Dell, please pop them in the Q&A section, or even right in the chat if you'd prefer. I see Laura has popped the link to the link on our website as well in the chat. And maybe what we'll do, Valerie, is we can come to you for your presentation. I will introduce you as well. So Valerie Karen grew up across traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory in Kingston, Ontario, and Montreal, Quebec. She studied at Bishop's University and then at the University of Saskatchewan. Valerie currently lives, works, and raises her family on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. As a physiotherapist, Valerie has worked in many health settings, including private multidisciplinary rehabilitation, acute care pediatrics, and adult neurology. She's currently completing her PhD in health sciences with a focus on neurological rehabilitation and is supervised by Dr. Sarah Donkers and Dr. Allison Oates. Valerie's research project centers Loki, a rehabilitation dog who she works with and collaborates with to provide animal assisted walking and balance interventions for children living with cerebral palsy. Valerie is a mother of two girls, Hannah and Eden, and they enjoy hiking, swimming, camping, and bike rides. Valerie looks forward to connecting with you all through this webinar. And Valerie, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Josh.
You're welcome.
I will share my slides here. Okay, are you all able to see this? Good. Okay, so I'm Valerie. It's nice to see you all here today. I am looking forward to talking a little bit about my experience working and living with our service dog, Loki. I want to first start with a land acknowledgement and just thank you, Colleen, for also doing this and acknowledging that I'm currently on Treaty 6 territory. And I would like to acknowledge the original peoples who cared for and continue to care for this land, as well as acknowledge the Indigenous peoples from the lands that you're all accessing this webinar from. This picture is particularly important to me. It was taken in September along the highway from Saskatchewan to Regina. I think it is a really representative picture of the Saskatchewan that I've known to grow and love. And you can see that Loki's in this picture with me. We travel to Regina monthly to work with the Wascana Children's Program. And it's been a really rewarding experience. And so this is kind of a moment of kind of hope. And I find the rainbow is just a really beautiful opportunity to look at that interconnectedness between the love and diversity, and kind of it's connected right to the land. So just a special picture from some of the experiences that Loki and I have shared together. So today I'm hoping to take you on a little bit of a journey, a little bit of a story about our experience working with Loki and learning from him, learning from our experiences. This is really specific to me as cisgender, white colonizer, French Canadian who does not live with a disability and who collaborates with Loki as a service animal. Loki doesn't provide me a service directly. And so I think it's really important to just clarify that Loki is a service animal that works in a variety of different settings with others, and my role is really to provide Loki support in providing the right commands as his handlers so that others have an opportunity to work with him and collaborate with him. But Colleen really spoke to it. A lot of my work has now come to a culmination of this human-animal bond and how we are able to create that connectedness in these therapeutic settings to allow children an opportunity to grow and participate in their communities. And so that's a lot of where my work has gone. So we'll talk a little bit about us, where Loki came from, and what his journey has been like. So who are we? Well, Josh mentioned that I'm Valerie. I grew up mostly in Ontario and Quebec and moved to Saskatchewan about 10 years ago. I completed my physical therapy training here at the university and then moved towards a PhD after working in clinical practice for 5 years. Loki is a certified service dog from the Mira Foundation in Quebec. He's designated as a rehabilitation dog. And so I will talk a little bit about what that means. And these are my girls. This is Hannah and Eden. So I'm also a mom. They're a big part of our world. And I will also give them the credit for a lot of Loki's unofficial training that he has received in the last few years. And so Loki is 5.5 years old. He's a Labradorese cross. And he particularly likes the snow. So I think Saskatchewan was a really good fit for him. So where did Loki start? Well, in 2018, a group of researchers came together and they thought that it would be a great idea to bring service dogs to Saskatchewan and introduce them into a variety of different rehabilitation settings with different people living with different impairments to see what the impact would be of having a service dog work and support interventions for rehabilitation specifically. And we were looking really at physical rehabilitation at that time. And so we connected with Mira because they had already started on this trajectory towards training these service dogs who were specifically for working in healthcare settings. And Mira is an organization that was created in 1981 in Quebec. They first started working with guide dogs for those who have visual impairments. They then started developing a variety of different breeding programs for mobility assistance dogs and autism services support. So they started to differentiate between a variety of different types of service dogs, and they were kind of some of the first in Canada to start this process. And we saw a lot of change in what a guide dog meant for different people living with different impairments. They classify their guide dogs a little bit differently, that a guide dog can be anyone providing or anyone who has a visual and or hearing impairment and or mobility assistance need. So they train a variety of different levels of guide dogs, just depending on their clients. And that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. So just to draw your attention back to what Colleen said is service dogs are specifically trained to assist a person with activities of daily living, and they can be supporting visible or invisible impairments. And this is going to be specific to the person and the dog that they are working with. Service dogs are not pets. They have a work or a job that they are responsible for, and it is grounded in teamwork and a partnership with their handler, and sometimes not only the handler but the person that they're supporting. So service dogs can look different in different contexts, and I think that lends really well to what Colleen spoke about, that the national accreditations and standards are not currently present, and our Saskatchewan standards are very different than other provinces. And this lends to a lot of confusion and difficulty for those who use service animals accessing the spaces that they need to access safely, and for their dogs to access safely as well. So a little bit about Mira and the dogs that they train. So I had to put in some puppy pictures here because, I mean, it's just an opportunity to do so. But the Mira Foundation is a little bit different than some of the other service dog organizations or service dog trainers. They actually have their own breeding program specific to the dogs that they train. And so they started with Bernese Mountain Dogs. If you've encountered a Bernese Mountain Dog, they're typically very, very engaged with human contact. They want to be loved on and cuddled on. And they're known for being really faithful companions. And they were originally started as kind of an all-around farm dog. And so they tend to be very vigilant and hardworking. And then they introduced the Labrador Retriever because they thought we need dogs that have a little bit more energy, that are a little bit more family oriented for some of our other goals with some of the patients that we are working with, or some of the clients that we are seeing. And Labradors were kind of selected because they have such a high level of self-confidence. They're a lively breed. If you've ever encountered a Labrador, they have a lot of personality. And that they forgive easily. And so they make a really well-suited dog to family life. As their breeding program grew and their program continued to evolve, they thought, well, we have these two dogs that are excellent. What will happen if we crossbreed these dogs? And so they, in 1996, they bred the first litter of Labernese puppies. So this is the cross between the Labrador Retriever and the Bernese Mountain Dog. And really the goal was to go and be able to find a dog that could meet both that personable, lively, and also that have that larger frame, and maybe that really person-drawn personality trait that we see in the Bernese Mountain Dog. So they breed these dogs, And then they put them into a foster system that they have developed there. All of their foster homes are trained to provide support to these puppies that are going to be moving into service dog training at around 12 months. The families that are supporting these puppies in their first year of life are focused on appropriate manners, house training, socialization, and some basic commands around like sit, stay, lie down. And then they also train them with a variety of different environments. So they're all trained specifically for what the goals are of the puppies that are going to be moving through the system. The dogs come back to the Mira Foundation's home base in outside of Montreal, Quebec at 12 months, and they're all brought into an assessment program. So they have 5 or 6 different trainers that work on a cohort of puppies. The puppies are exposed to different people, different environments. They're exposed to inside, outside, large crowds, small crowds. They are exposed to large groups of dogs, small groups of dogs, all sorts of different things. And then the trainers watch videos of these puppies and make decisions about the personality traits that they're seeing. The trainers then spend about 2 weeks with each puppy to make decisions about their personality traits and the work that they seem most inclined towards. At this point, they often will make decisions about, are you a dog that is showing traits towards being a service dog? Would you be better suited to a companion animal, or what work might you be most interested in? So at around 14 months, all of the puppies have a designation and they are sent into different training programs. Over the next 6 to 12 months, depending on the designation of the dog, they will spend every day with a group of 4 other dogs and 1 trainer working on a variety of different skills. And the dogs at that point, at around 14 to 16 months, already have a project or a person that the trainers have decided is going to be a good fit for them. So they have a profile and a description of the people or the programs that they're trying to match these dogs with. And that is how they make these decisions about how are we going to train this dog to begin with, and then where is this dog going to fit in our training program and with the people that we have waiting for a service animal. So this is Loki when he was a puppy at about 12 weeks. He was born in April 2018. And as I was saying, each dog, just like humans, demonstrates different aptitudes towards different work. We all have things that we're really good at and things that we don't enjoy as much. And dogs are the same, as we all know. Loki was a puppy that was kind of different and special, and they knew that they were going to need a dog that was well suited to a variety of environments and that was really drawn towards people more than anything else for our project in particular, because they knew that there was going to be an external handler and then a person, a client, a patient working directly with the dog. And that is a very challenging relationship for a service animal because they are typically trained to work with one person. And so in 2018, we brought our research team back together. Dr. Dell, Colleen was a big part of this project, and I've had just the most privilege to work with her over the last few years. And they came together and created a grant for the Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation with Mira's support to be funded to bring a service dog to Saskatchewan to work on a variety of projects in rehabilitation care. Now, this is not a typical service dog, as I was kind of alluding to, and it requires some very special skills. And this is where Mira has created a special projects division for dogs that are well suited to certain types of work, but also demonstrate aptitude towards certain environments or certain people and are able to create connection in a different way. So these dogs are directly siloed away from the other dogs to create these special projects dogs because they're still trained as service animals, particularly like for Loki, he's a rehabilitation dog. So he was trained as a mobility assistance dog first, and then was trained in his second job as being a service animal that's going to be working with a handler and a patient. And so he has this dual role. They also train some of their autism services support dogs for locations like schools, social work departments, or police departments, where dogs might be entering into spaces like courtrooms or different environments like long-term care or palliative care, where the dogs are going to have a little bit of a different role in terms of signaling for certain behaviors to the handler, but also creating that connection with those who might be in really challenging situations and need support in those contexts. And so this is where our project started, was in 2018. So this journey wasn't easy by any means, and it sounds like it was all kind of fluffy and beautiful, but it was a really, really long process to get Loki here to Saskatchewan safely and well. And so originally our project had asked for 2 dogs to be able to alleviate some of the load of working, a full 8-hour day. Wasn't reasonable for 1 dog, so we needed 2 dogs originally. This is Hope. She's the black, white, and brown puppy below Loki, the large black fluffy one. And when we went to train in October of 2019 at Mira, Hope unfortunately did not make it through training with one of our handlers. The connection wasn't there, and they weren't able to find that balance between the handler and the dog. And so we ended up having to just bring Loki home, and Hope was reassigned to a different family, and she works now as an autism services support dog in Quebec, where she is supporting a young girl in her journey through elementary school. And so I think that the idea that these dogs are selected specifically for certain aptitudes is really important to remember when we're looking at service dog training. So not every dog is the right fit for the service that they're going to be providing. And as trainers or as handlers or as individuals who are working with service animals, we need to be aware of the dog's wellness and their happiness in these roles. Hope probably wouldn't have been very happy working in the role that we were going to be assigning her, really, because it is assigned. Whereas Loki, I'm going to show you some videos, but Loki is exceptionally happy in his work, and he demonstrates that through his personality, but also through his behaviors. And that's also the way that they create connection. So when Loki enters a room, he has a special skill of connecting with those people that are needing him the most. And he has figured out very quickly that often when he enters into the room, because I work in pediatrics and youth, it's usually the smallest person in the room. And so he usually goes directly for the child or the person that is going to be working with him. And that is without prompting. And that is just innate to who he is as a dog. And I think that at Mira, they did a really good job of recognizing those traits. And so I think it's important just to bring back that service dog training and that partnership and that bond that's created is at the basis of creating healthy relationships between the dog and their work, but also the dog and their handler or the person that's going to be working with them. So, yeah. So Loki came to Saskatchewan. These are some of the handlers that I work with. So there are 3 of us. I work with Dr. Audrey Zucker-Levin. So Loki's giving her a kiss up there in the top right-hand corner. And I work with Dr. Sarah Donkers. As we're the 3, we share Loki as our child, I suppose. He's kind of shared between the 3 of us. And the reason for that is so that Loki can work with a variety of different providers in different settings, depending on the work that we're doing. And so we were all excited. We brought Loki back in October of 2019. And because we knew at the center of this project, Loki's wellness was most important, we had him assessed at the University of Saskatchewan by Dr. Romney Pinto. And at this time, we thought he was perfect. We knew he was perfect. He was the dog for us. He was going to do all this wonderful work, and we were very excited. And Dr. Pinto said, he's very close to perfect, but he is still growing and he's not ready to work at this level. He's sore. He's got some concerns around his knees and his hips. And I don't think he's ready based on the training volume that he just experienced to go into work. So we took 2 months off and we did some work with Loki to get him ready. I think that this is a part of service dog training that I wasn't aware of or I wasn't prepared for. And I think it's a big part of where my advocacy and where I feel is so important, and Colleen spoke to this quite a bit, is the dog has to be well in their work, and it should be centered as part of our practice. We are very good at making sure that humans are well in their work. But when we have service animals in these environments, we need to make sure that they're also well. And so we learned quickly that a service dog requires as much rehabilitation and as much care as any human does. And so these are some of the things that we did with Loki to get him ready for work. These are some of the things that we continue to do with Loki. We have a training program or an exercise program that I do 3 days a week with Loki. It's exercise based on the needs that he has for his work. So a lot of core strength and a lot of stability work, because that's what he does, is provide stability and walking and balance. And we also do a lot of walking training to make sure that his walking pattern is optimized so that when he's walking with patients, he is well in that work. So it's not all the right food and the right love and affection. A lot of it has been making sure that he is physically well to do his job. And I think that this speaks to what Colleen mentioned about standards of care and standards of training and policy that needs to be in place to protect the welfare of animals that are in these roles, and to better inform some of the work that we do. That Loki, to me, I don't use Loki in my work. He is a collaborator. He actually often drives the bus, I'm not going to lie, about the choices that we make around treatment. And he chooses to work every day. He steps into his harness. It's a decision that we make together. It's work that he enjoys, and we have gotten very good at finding our way. And so this is all fine and dandy. We got to December, January 2020, and we said, fantastic, our dog is doing well. We are ready to start collecting some data. And then, as everyone is aware, we entered into a global pandemic and everyone went home, and well, everything got shut down. So it was very hard 18 months of having a service dog who is trained to work in healthcare not be able to go to work. And so Loki was qualified as a non-essential service, obviously. And so he was home with one of our handlers for 18 months, not allowed to enter into a variety of environments, and inevitably had a hard time reintegrating into work or remembering what his job was. And some of it is maybe the comfort of being at home and getting a lot of treats and belly rubs, but also the exposure to it for sure. So this is where Colleen and I started working really closely together. I'm so thankful that we had the opportunity to do this. I don't think that Loki would have really become the dog that he is if we had not worked on this together so closely. So in January of 2021, we decided that we needed to do something with him. So we assessed him. We watched what he did in data collection. We kind of had a good idea that he would be okay working with a variety of different, I don't know what these new symbols are. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure how to make them stop. They keep showing up. At least it was a thumbs up today. But a lot of the work that we were doing was just one-on-one with some patients that were living with spinal cord injury to see if he could come back to his training to provide support for those who had impairments with walking. It went so. And so we decided that we would take Loki back to Mira, and that we would also certify Loki as a St. John ambulance therapy dog. So Colleen was instrumental in getting us set up with the right people, and we worked really closely with her team to bring Loki into the vaccination clinics that were occurring in the fall and winter of 2021. It's really where I started to see Loki kind of bloom and flourish as a dog, particularly where we started to see his affinity for working with kids. And so he was drawn to these situations where there was a lot of heavy emotion, where there was a lot of stress and fear. And he was just really good at creating opportunities for kids to feel safe and confident and in control. And that was something that we hadn't seen before in those interactions. And so it was a really special part of his training that lent itself to his service dog work. I don't think that our project would have been as successful in his service dog work had he not had the opportunity to work in the therapy dog world. So Loki is dual certified. He does 2 jobs. We have seen him grow exponentially in that time. He went back to Mira in September of 2021 for some boot camp. I like to call it boot camp because it was for both of us. We learned a lot together in those 7 days. I suppose that's something that I didn't speak to yet, but Mira requires all of their handlers and clients who are working with service dogs to spend 7 to 14 days on site with their trainers and their dog to determine if they're able to create a bond, how they're going to work with the skills that they require, any adaptations or changes to training that need to occur or retraining that needs to occur. And so we went together for retraining to learn from their trainers and develop some new skills. This is also where we started working with Wascana Children's Program in Regina. So Loki and I travel monthly, as I mentioned, to Regina. We work with a variety of children who experience everything from neurodevelopmental delays to autism to pain-related disorders, and a variety of other impairments or disabilities, visible and invisible. And we support therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, clinic days, physiotherapy. We just spend our days talking to children and their families and creating an opportunity for a more family-centered approach. And that takes me to our research work, which has evolved tremendously from where it started. Our focus was really integrating a service animal into an animal-assisted intervention for physiotherapy-related goals. And this was in children who were living with cerebral palsy. So cerebral palsy is a neurological condition that impacts gross motor function. So walking and balance particularly are impaired. And these children spend a lot of time in therapeutic contexts and in hospital contexts. And we wanted to know what was the impact of integrating a service animal into these spaces to support walking and balance training. And how did families and children experience that? And what did that look like? And a lot of my work, I thought, was going to start, and we're gonna do this walking and balance training, and kids are gonna get really good at walking, and their balance is going to be really great. And that is true. It did really help a lot of kids. But what we learned from the families and the children in our interviews was that it wasn't that the intervention was different in any way than their typical physiotherapy, because as a collaborative team, we built this intervention based on what is typically provided for children for walking and balance. So it should look very similar to what they typically were exposed to. What changed was that kids felt secure and safe and confident and in control, that the dog was there just for them and was there to provide support so that they could be more independent in the activities that were being asked of them. The families and the children showed that these kids were able to participate in things that they had maybe never tried. A lot of the families identified that the activities that you're asking them to do are things that have been asked of them for 10, 12, whatever years, and that they have always refused to do because of fear or pain or discomfort or just a general unwillingness because of the amount of time that they spend in these contexts. And now they come into therapy and they just do it because Loki is here, he is safe, he is trained specifically to provide the type of support that they felt they needed. None of these kids had the same diagnosis of cerebral palsy. None of them had the same impairments. They all walked differently, acted differently, came from different walks of life and different environments. And each one of them created an instant bond with the dog. They walked in, Loki was up and there and in it and fully invested. And a lot of these pictures are taken, spontaneously throughout our data collections. we can see a lot of smiles. Some of my favorites are kind of down in the bottom corner here on the left, where Loki is lying on top of our client. That's his happy place, is on top of people, or even just his preference to provide kisses in opportune moments when children are very close to him. He's not supposed to lick. That's a rule. But when the opportunity strikes, he's going to sneak it in there if he can. So there's a picture down on the bottom right there where we see that. Unfortunately, physio is boring. I will acknowledge that. And when we work in peds, a lot of our job is making things fun. And I knew that bringing a dog to physio was going to make things fun for kids who like dogs. But I didn't realize that the bond would be so instantaneous from the moment that they met him, and then that bond would last more than 6 months. So we did intervention at an acute time point where kids met him once, they walked with him once, and then they went away. And then we also did some interventions where children met him the first time. We waited 8 weeks, they did an intervention, and then they didn't see him again for another 8 weeks. So that was a 6-month timeline. And from the last interview that we did at that 6 months, Loki is my friend. He is there for me. He is part of my life. He knows how to support me. And so those relationships that are built are lasting. And we know that these kids connect with Loki. So our participant in the middle here with the red shirt has continued to see Loki for the last year. Every time we travel to Regina, they come from Moose Jaw to see Loki monthly. And it's a big part of him feeling independent in his walking and just feeling safe and able to try things that he otherwise wasn't willing to try. And so that, yes, their walking did get better. They got faster. Yes, their balance got better. But more importantly, this connection and opportunity for kids to feel supported and cared for in these healthcare settings was really what came of this, because it really informed how we move forward with providing these types of interventions and how we integrate service dogs effectively. So even the most professional of us have our days. Loki is a lover of water and the beach. He has his moments where he gets to be a little bit wild, and this is one of them this summer. And he is a service dog. He has a job, but he also has wellness at the background of everything that we do. And this is where Loki feels well. So we take him lots to the river. Yes, he has a very long coat. Yes, it is an extremely daunting task of getting the sand out of him, but he loves it. And so it's well worth it for me. So this is our journey. It's November 2023. It's been 5 years of being on this trajectory towards this point. I only see it going up from here in terms of the work that we're going to do, and the way that will inform, hopefully, standards of practice and policy to change how we train these animals to provide appropriate support to the right person in the right context, and how we support them in doing their work well as seeing them as a collaborator in the work that we do, and not just a tool. And that's been a really big learning for me. And I'm really appreciative to the whole team, and particularly to Loki, who is a wonderful dog, and at this point is a really important part of our community. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I really enjoyed Loki with the zoomies.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
This is your chance, folks, to submit your questions. You can pop them in the chat or use the Q&A feature. We can ask questions to both our presenters, and there is one waiting here. The question is, what are the indicators, Valerie, I guess we'll put this to you. What are the indicators of emotional wellness with a service dog?
Yeah, so I am not a behavioral specialist by any means for dogs. I know my dog really well. It's an important part of building a team. Some of the behaviors that I've noticed, and Colleen mentioned a few of them as well, is typical aggression type behaviors or fear-based behaviors. So ears flat, shaking, tail between the legs, either trying to withdraw from a situation or remove themselves from a situation. I always know Loki is tired when he chooses to lie down away from humans. That's always his good signal of, okay, like I've met my quota for this portion of my workday. And Colleen mentioned this, as a service dog handler and or someone who has a service dog that is providing a service, you have to be prepared to remove your dog from a situation when they are no longer well or not able to do their job well. And that can be really challenging, particularly when you're working with kids. But it's an important learning piece as well for them, that he's still a dog, and that he still has, choices in the work that he does. And sometimes he has really good days, and sometimes he's feeling a little tired. Some days are heavier for him than others. And so we've gotten really good at reading the room and reading him. But there are different signals for different dogs. And I think it's really important to be aware or prepared to respond.
Those comments remind me of a former coworker that we had here at the Sask SPCA, Leanne Sillers, and her dog Jack, who was a therapy dog. And I would often remember Leanne talking about how she just knew Jack well enough to recognize his indicators, and he could speak to her kind of non-verbally and say, hey, I'm kind of done, and I think it's time for me to wrap up the day. And I think that's important, as you as the handler know the dog probably better than anyone, and can recognize when it's time for a break. And I think that segues into the next two questions that we have here. And two questions, both asking how long you expect Loki's career to be.
Yeah, so as a service dog working every day with a person who is needing the service directly, they estimate 5 to 8 years, depending on the type of service that they are providing. Loki will probably have a career closer to the 8 to 10 year mark. He doesn't work every day, and his job looks a little bit different. As I mentioned, he does do therapy dog work, which looks different in terms of the demand on his physical body. It's still very demanding work, and it looks different. And I think that work, to be honest, is harder for Loki. That's where I do see him withdrawing more, is when he feels he's had a really heavy day, is when there's been a lot of his job being more in a therapeutic context for supporting a difficult situation, rather than in his mobility context, where I think he's more naturally inclined. And so I'm thinking probably I'm hoping another 3 to 4 years for sure. He's super healthy and very well. But that is credited to, Dr. Pinto and her team, and all of the work that they have put into him, and also educating us and how to better support him. And so I highly encourage you, if you have a dog, to have them assessed by a veterinarian who specializes in rehabilitation of dogs, so that you can give your dog the best life that they can have, and so that they can work the longest that they can. So, yeah.
Thanks, Valerie. We still have a couple of moments here, folks. So if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A section or in the chat. While we wait for last questions, I will maybe ask you, Dr. Dell, if you have any parting thoughts for folks that are attending here today.
That's a good question. I don't really. It's just, I think Valerie just made it really clear too how important the bond is. And we didn't plan that at all. We didn't know what each other was presenting. How important that bond is, because that is their welfare. And I like too that I'm just going to give an example. Valerie's saying, right, about the rehab and their physical wellness. And that's something I've grown to appreciate over time as well. And so EJ does do rehab. I have exercises for him, and Molly does as well. The bulldog I got, and it was all in a preventative context of what demands are put on them, and then just making sure they can have the longest life they can. And of course, she's a bulldog, so she comes with some health concerns anyways, but that whole, I've switched into that more preventative, and again, always the welfare of the animal at the center. Valerie just showed that so well in her work, because if the animal is not well, they are not doing their job. If our goal was to help the human, they're not doing their job, right, as best as they can. And as Valerie gave with the example of Loki, they absolutely love what they're doing. So you want them to be as healthy as they can so they can continue. Like, you take them out wherever, right? And they're just so happy. In some environments, they're more happy than others. And those are the ones you end up visiting in more, like in a therapy dog context. Or for EJ in a service dog context, there's some things he just is going to work on for a long time and he does not appreciate in his life. He doesn't like any type of fire, just does not like it. If it's like in a picture or anything. So that's one we're just staying away from until we can get a little bit more confidence in little things. So appreciating that for him.
Thank you. And Valerie, any parting comments from you?
I don't think so. I think this is just really rewarding work, and I'm really thankful to the team. And I think it's kind of funny that Colleen and I got the opportunity to do this together, because yeah, I'm very appreciative of the work that we've gotten to do together, and it's just been really, really exciting. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you both for being here today. We really do appreciate it. I will also remind folks that this is a series of webinars, and the third and final webinar in this series is coming up on Thursday, November 30th, and it will cover captive wildlife registration, or regulations rather, sorry. Thinking about the registration link that is in the chat, so you can check out Captive Wildlife Regulations, that webinar, November 30th. Danielle from our office has popped that registration link in the chat, so please feel free to register for that. And then there is a survey that was going to pop up once you exit Zoom today. If you could also take a moment to fill out that survey, answer those questions, that helps us plan future webinars and conferences as well. Once again, Colleen and Valerie, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your day with us. And thank you to everybody who again joined us for this webinar, and hopefully we will see you on November 30th. So thank you again, and farewell, everyone.